Well, hello everybody. Another exciting day for us here at Four Pines Quilting. We are going to demonstrate how to do Prairie Meadows Block 1. In your kit, you should have seen this notebook. This is Block 1. Guess what? Everything we're going to talk about goes in the same order as you see on here and inside. Lori also gave you a nice little diagram right here on page 15 that identifies each block, and we're using the same numbers that she is. I'm going to do a video today on how I go about prepping for block 1. Lucky you if you have a luminaire, as that's my favorite, but I'll also demonstrate how to use a scanner if you have a machine like a Dream Machine and you don't have the projector like the luminaire has. I'll also show you my technique if you have neither one of those machines and you just have to use the old-fashioned way of aligning things. So we're going to cover 3 different alignment procedures today. All right, so let's talk about preparing. I have tested a lot of different ways to do these blocks, and my preferred method is using the SF101 or Kimberbell's fusible backing. The reason for that is twofold, and truthfully, I don't care if you're using your sewing machine to put your applique on, if you're doing your applique by hand, if you're using an embroidery machine. I highly recommend backing these blocks. One reason is this is a very light fabric, and we are going to be appliquing with colored thread. And I am not going to be happy if somewhere down the road a loose thread peeks out between my batting and my backing fabric and I see a green caterpillar. That's not what I want. So this prevents that from happening. There will be no show through. The other thing it does is acts as a stabilizer for my fabric. This is not heavy embroidery. This is lightweight embroidery. If you back with SF101 or Kimberbell's fusible backing or something similar, you will need to use no other stabilizer. This is the only stabilizer you will require, and you don't have to take it out. Yes, you get to leave it in. Now, if you're one of those people that doesn't have a scanner and a projector, you will need to use a tearaway stabilizer in order to get it in the hoop. And we'll cover that later. But no matter what, I highly suggest you back everything with SF101 or a similar product. Now, another tip for you, you'll notice that my SF101 is oversized. See how I'm purposely, it comes wider than I need it on the bolt anyway, and what I've done is I've left it oversized. The reason for that is it makes hooping this block a breeze. I am able to hoop it without any additional fabric sewn onto it. It fits perfectly. The other thing it does for me is it fuses these edges really well. So I'm not going to get the ratty-tatty stuff going on because I'm hooping my fabric edges. They are actually going to be sealed to this 101. So it leaves me with a very tidy product. So here's how to apply SF101. And again, I recommend this for anybody making this project. First of all, let me remind you that you pressed all your seams open. It's not the end of the world if you didn't, but you are going to get better results. Through this whole project, Lori recommends pressing the seams open, and I, for one, like it. The other thing I want to do is remove as many stray threads as I see. Now, sometimes the more you pull, the more you get, but at least they're the same color as my background. But I want to make sure it's clean, because once I seal this puppy, it's sealed. So first thing, I'm going to make sure my iron is on and happy. He is. I like to, I think I just have water in this today, which is fine. Myself, I never spritz with just water. Thinking if I'm going to spritz, I'm going to add a little stiffener along the way. That's just the way I am. So, but you don't have to. You'll notice my fabric has already been stabilized with Best Press a couple times. And every one of my seams, by the way, once this was done, I stabilized again with Best Press. I don't want anything going wrong. So here's a trick if you don't know. Now I got to remember to shut this off. There, phew, it's a new one for me. SF101 likes moisture. It actually helps activate its glue. So I wet the fabric down like that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my SF101 as well. I want a really nice, firm bond. Notice I'm just doing half. What happens when the iron hits this water, it activates the glue. Not that it won't dry, but I'm telling you, you get a much better seal. I probably used a little bit more water than I needed to, just saying. But that's all right. So now, notice I'm not ironing. I'm pressing. I'm going up and down. And here's why you don't want to iron. I don't want to stretch anything. And that can happen because you saw all that water I put on there. We're not stretching it, okay? We're just ironing it. I'm going to do it from both sides, but I want to get the other half before we do. And notice I'm on a wool mat, and I'm still going to the edges. I want those edges sealed. It's not going to ruin my wool mat, people. It's not, I promise. Okay, so now we're going to turn it around. We're going to do the other half. Obviously, at home, you probably have a bigger workspace, but I still would do half at a time. Again, I don't want to stretch anything. So I think I can go a little lighter with this one this time. But see how nicely that stuck? Okay, shut off. I have to get used to that valve. I didn't bring my own in, so I have to get used to it. But I love these new misters. You can move them faster than I did the first time, that's for sure. All right, so again, I'm making sure I have nothing stuck under there like a dead fly that I don't want, because once I seal this baby, it's sealed. And you gotta love the sizzle, huh? Shh, shh, shh. This is where you could probably edit out some of my stuff.
I was thinking of putting some steam in there like a spa.
And like I said, I always do both sides. I did the back side first. See how easy that comes off the mat? No problem. Now, look at this. I have to do this side, because if you look carefully, it's got little ripples in it. We don't want that. Now, when I do this side, I'm just careful not to go way over the edge. If you're nervous about getting your iron on this stuff, put a piece of parchment paper down if you need to, or one of those applique sheets. If you have a Cricut iron, it's really easy to get close to the edge. And now remember, I sealed the edge on the back, so it's not that it's not sealed. I'm just mostly drying out things now because I use so much water. Okay, now I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to get the other side. If you have any questions on how to apply this, the beauty of the Facebook page that we've started is that you can ask any and all questions right then and there, and probably get an answer faster and more knowledgeable than if you come in the store and ask. There it is! You are going to want to perform this procedure for every background block that you're making, which is 12 of them. I didn't do it till I got ready to do the applique, but I would definitely not skip it. And again, it means you're not having to use another stabilizer if you happen to have a scanner or a projector, which most of our people do. Okay, now let's talk about the anatomy of these applique blocks. If you look at the picture of the quilt here on your book cover, you'll see that they all are made basically the same. You see an embellishment in the middle, you see appliques going out to the corners, and you see appliques in the middle of all of those. It is the same, all 12 blocks, and they're symmetrical, which makes it really cool. So what I want to do is identify different points on my background block so I know where to start my applique. If you look at the center of your block, this is where we're going to mark all our intersections. You're going to see 3 files that you're going to download. One is called A. You do not have to write on your quilt this way. I'm doing it simply for demonstration purposes. This is intersection A. File A always goes in this intersection. This intersection is what we're going to use to line up the crosshairs so we know we've placed it properly. Guess what? Here's another A over here. Here's another A over here. Here's another A over here. Those represent my A files, the files that will make up the design that goes to the corner. Where do my C's go? Here. No, B's, Becky. Sorry. Here's where this is called my B file. This is another B file. This is another B file. This is another B file. So each one of these intersections that I've marked B are where my B files are going to have to be registered. And C is always the center. Every time we give you files, A is always going to go in these positions. B is always going to go in these positions. C is always going to go in these positions. And you should always do them in order of the alphabet. A, B, C. C is always last, it's in the center. Sometimes you can mix and match A and B. In fact, if you're really brave and you want to use a bigger hoop and you want to add A, B in the same hooping, feel free. I am not going to suggest it done that way because it is a blanket stitch and you need to be very accurate with where the laser pieces in the blanket stitch sit. If we were using a satin stitch, it'd be a no-brainer for me. I would combine these files, use the biggest hoop I could, because a satin stitch gives you more wiggle room. The blanket stitch does not give you wiggle room. So you really want to, in my opinion, use the smallest hoop possible for each one of your files. The way I approached it was I did all my A's first, then I did my B's, and then I did my C's. And we're actually going to do that today, so you're going to get to see that. I want to take a moment to talk about how I would hoop and align things if I wasn't using the scanner or projector. I would recommend a sticky back stabilizer. This happens to be one of my favorites. It's Kimberbell's Sticky Back Wash Away Stabilizer. Why wash away? Because I don't like to pick out tear away if I don't have to. You can use a tear away sticky back and remove it, but you got to remove it. It doesn't hold up in the laundry, guys, and it's going to affect your final product. So what I have here is a sticky back wash away. Now again, some people might argue that, oh, that's not going to be firm enough, but it is because you put your 101 or similar product on the back of your background block. The only reason I'm using this is because I have a smaller hoop and I don't have a projector and I don't have a scanner. So I have to make my alignments on my stabilizer, then be able to adhere my block down, then go to the machine. So those of you with Dream Machine or higher, and maybe some other machines, I don't know, but this is for those of you who are not lucky enough to have the fancy alignment features built into your machine. I'm cutting off a piece, and by the way, you would have to do this for every hooping. And you'll see when we go to the other machines, I don't have to redo anything. So just so you know, in our classroom, you can come in and rent a luminaire for the whole day and probably get 3-4 blocks done. Just saying. All right, so this is up. Now, when we hoop this, we're going to hoop what they call shiny side up. This stuff here. And I don't know if it's really shiny, but that's what they call it. And I've already lost the bottom of my hoop. Okay, so when you hoop sticky back, it's thicker than your other stabilizers, so you do have to loosen this thing up, your screw up quite a bit to get it to go in there. All right, here we have the sticky back stabilizer. Mine's a wash away version inside my 8x12 hoop. Shiny side up. What you do with sticky back is you score around the edge. I'm using just a pin. It's not a fine point pin, it's just a pin. And then I like to go like this just because I do. You don't have to, but I find it easier. What I'm trying to do is remove this shiny side. Which is, there we go. And what I'm left with is something extremely sticky. This is what I'm going to put in my machine. We're going to bring up file A. Remember I told you file A was the first one we did? So now I'm going to go over to the machine. Okay. All right, so I'm over at the machine now, and I've pulled up file A. Now, if you're lucky enough to own Brilliance Essentials or the Database Design Center from Brother, you can have just sent it wirelessly. You don't have to load it on a USB stick. And truthfully, that's how I do mine. I go right from the computer, download the file, and then shoot it over to my machine. But if you feel the need to put it on a stick, feel free to do so. All right, so I'm going to pull up block 1A. throughout this entire thing. That's the naming convention. Block 1A, Block 1B, 1C. When we go to 2, 2A, 2B, 2C. It's very easy. Now remember, I don't have a scanner or a projector. I'm going to pretend I don't. So I need some way to align my files. The first step of every one of these files, and I'm going to step forward into embroidery land here. The first step of every one of these files is a crosshair. That's not the center of your hoop. That's the intersection I was talking about. The A intersection on my fabric. If I don't have a scanner or projector, I need to stitch this out onto my stabilizer. That's how I will align my programs. If I have a scanner or a stabilizer, I can skip stitching this section out. You'll also notice, for those of you who have a Brothers scan and cut, that we made sure the positions were set up with Brothers applique positions. So if you talk to your scan and cut, guess what you can do? You can do more than one quilt. You can send your designs to your scan and cut, and it will cut out more pieces for you because you only have pieces for one. So anyway, sidetrack. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch out this first crosshair. Doesn't really matter what you do the crosshair in. I would probably, if I really needed to stitch this out, do it in black because you're going to want to see it. I'm just loading in the first thread I know I'm going to use. Okay, so this one you have to stitch out if you do not have a scanner or a projector. It's going to stitch out the crosshairs left and right. We're going to take the hoop off the machine, and I'm going to show you how to line it up and then put it back in the machine. We're going to finish the applique using the scanning and projector, but I'm just going to show you how to use these to line up your background block. Notice it is not in the center of the hoop. Do not be mistaken. That's why I'm making you do it this way. It's not in the center of your hoop. Okay, so now we're going to take the hoop off the machine and we're going to go back to the mat so I can show you how to line things up. Great, we're back at the wool mat, which is awesome for doing this kind of work. You can also use one of the June Taylor's mats too, but the wool mat is good for so many things. Remember we marked intersection A? Remember we're doing file A? I am going to take a pin and I'm going to go in the center of my intersection A, and I'm going to go look at the intersection. Oh, see, I should have used black, but I can see it. I'm going to line that up with the intersection of my crosshairs. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see that my seam, the beauty of this stuff is the seam lines are built in. They're built in. All I'm doing now is matching my seam line up with my crosshair going in that direction. And I'm looking over here and I'm lining my seam line up with a crosshair in that direction. And then, you guessed it, I'm sticking it down. And then that's it. Remove this pin, back to the machine, you're ready to applique. Okay, now I'd like to cover how we do alignments if we are lucky enough to have a luminaire with a projector, because that's really where this project shines. I, again, would stay with the smallest hoop possible. I happen to know that this is looks like the screen is telling me about a 7x7 size file right now. So I could reach for my 8x12 and use that. I could reach for, this is my favorite one to use whenever I can get away with it. Unfortunately, it's 5x7. So it's not going to work on this angled one, so I can't use it for this one. But another favorite of mine, if you're very careful, and you have to be careful, is this magnetic hoop. In all honesty, as soon as Brothers' new hoop comes out, I know that's going to be my favorite one for this product, the new 10.5-inch magnetic hoop. I just don't have it yet. So you can use any hoop size you want. The beauty of hooping this is that because I have my 101 all around it, it's also helpful to align things up. It's magic. If I take my 101 and I move it up to the top of the hoop like that, it's helping me align it straighter. Doesn't have to be because we have a nice projector. But I'm actually using that as a way to kind of start lining things up. In fact, I'm going to use it over here too. So see how I said the inside of my block, but I've got this oversized 101? That gives me lots of wiggle room for lining stuff up. Take my hoop, I'm looking at the top and the bottom, I'm putting it in like that. I'm brushing it over, making sure it's nice and smooth, and snap it down. The other thing I like to do before I go to my machine, and this is to ensure no movement, is take my fingers and make sure those hoops are lined up. Because when I go to take this hoop in and out of the machine, even though this is a nice tight fit, I check that. That's how I know my stuff hasn't misaligned by accident. So I'm checking bottom, top. It's pushed all the way in. I'm hooped and I'm ready to go. Now let's go over to the machine and I'll show you how easy it is to line this up. I'm double checking that my hoop has not moved because I am just, extra easy. I'm also making sure my fabric is nice and firm. I don't want to see bubbles or ripples inside this hoop. I've seen that on other people's projects and they go, yeah, I know. Well, it does affect the final product. So it's so easy to hoop these. Take the extra moment and make sure it's nice and tidy. Now, I'm going to go onto my machine and we're going to go backwards because we're going to pretend we just brought this up for the first time, okay? I have crosshairs that are going to allow me to align. I'm going to go into embroidery, and as soon as I do, I'm going to put on my projector. Pointer pen. What's going to happen is I'm going to project down my whole design, but most importantly, these crosshairs. Hopefully they're showing up. These crosshairs. If I were to stitch this out right now, it's nowhere near where it needs to be, right? I need to come up to here, because remember, we decided this was A. So I'm simply going to use my buttons, and I'm going to move that crosshair over, and I'm going to move that crosshair up. Okay. When you're aligning your embroidery design, if you hear this, that means you're at the top of the embroidery field. My machine knows what hoop I have on. It knows a limitation on how far it can go up. It is telling me I can't get your design up any higher. And I will, darn it, I need it to go a 1/4 inch higher. It's not the end of the world if that happens. It just means I didn't put my fabric quite right. And this is what I love about the projector. Lots of times I don't even put the top of the hoop on until I put my projection on. Watch this trick, people. My hoop is still on my machine. I just removed the top. I take it and I get it pretty close to where I need it to be. And I'll show you that on the next one. I do that sometimes, before I even stick my magnetic hoop on, because then I'm not guessing. But I still go through the effort to make sure these top things line up, because that's telling me nothing's going to move. And I make sure this is all the way in, and I make sure my fabric is nice and tidy. Then I look to see, do I need to change anything? Because truthfully, lots of times I do, because it might wiggle on me. See, I don't like that. I'm going to fix that. And I look at that, and I can see that it's off rotation a tad that I don't like. So some of you will want to tug on your fabric like this. If it's a tiny amount, I'm going to let you do that. If it's not, you're going to use the rotation buttons over here on your machine. The rotations over here to line it up. But if you get used to projecting that down before you finalize the entire hoop, it's amazing how much time it saves you, which is why I like the Brother Magnetic hoops the best, because you can take off just a couple magnets and stick them back on. It's easier than this whole big piece from Dime. Not to say Dime's lousy, it's not. And that's all I have right now, so that's what I'm using. So now I'm aligned. If you have any questions, shout out. Okay, so now we've got our fabric in, we've got our fabric aligned. We can clearly see intersection A. We either did it with the sticky back tear away, or we did it with the scanner, sticky back wash away, the scanner, or in my case, I have the projector down. Now I'm ready to start stitching. So I say okay on my screen. Now the first thing it wants to stitch out is those crosshairs. I don't need crosshairs. I can skip over it. And guess what? If you have one of the new Luminaire 3 upgrades, you can assign that as a no stitch, and it'll skip over it automatically. We're going to hit our plus or minus needle button, and we're going to move forward 1. Now you'll see all of a sudden I'm on my stems and my leaves. I have loaded green thread in because my stems and leaves are going to be out of green fabric. Some of you will resist putting in the same color as the blanket stitch is going to be. I highly suggest you do it this way. You just get a much better finished product. It builds up the edges just a little bit better. Don't say you have to. Some of you won't, but I'm going to suggest you do. So I have green loaded in. I'm going to hit go, and it's going to do the placement stitches for my stem and my leaves. Pay attention to the order they stitch out in. As we move from block to block, the stems are not always underneath the leaves. Sometimes the leaves are on top, sometimes the leaves are under. And I will try to make a point of pointing that out when that happens, but don't get into the rhythm of, oh, the stems are always on the bottom. Within this block, A is always the same. So you see it did the stem first, now it's doing the leaves. That's how I need to iron them on. Stems first, leaves second. Meet you over at the mat, and we'll find our pieces and put them on. All right, now we're back over at the pressing station. Inside your book, you have all your one pieces together. By the way, if you have trouble with any of your pieces lining up, it's probably because you haven't rotated them quite correctly. I'm going to show you how wonderful these things fit. Oh, except if you're doing stems. The stems are all the way in the back of your book. In the very last page of your book, you're going to find some green stem fabric. It's all had the fusible applied to it already. You've got more than enough to create every block. We were going to give you individual size pieces, but to be honest with you, that just became a nightmare for people losing things. So we have given you these pieces that you can cut into 1/4-inch strips for every block. You just simply chop them with your 1/4-inch ruler and you're done. So now I've got all the pieces I need right here. And it's saying the first thing I need to do is put down my stem. Now because this is Wonder Under, the best and easiest way to get anything off is to simply score it with a pen. And don't score all the way to the end. It's not the end of the world if you do, but it does kind of ravel your fabric a tad. So I tried to score towards the middle. So here's the pieces I know I'm going to need for my A file. I can look at my picture, I can look at the screen to determine that. I've also removed all the Wonder Under, so I'm ready to go. Here's how I'm going to do the stems in every block. I'm going to come up to the top, line it up. Within, it should literally kiss those green placement stitches. I'm going to anchor it at the top. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to determine how long it needs to be. Now keep in mind, the top of my stem doesn't show. The bottom of my stem doesn't show on any block. So it's not like you can't be a little bit off. You can be off, no harm, no foul. So boom, something like that, I'm happy. What you don't want to be off on is lining it up with the placement lines. If I line it up like this, guys, this is where my blanket stitch is going. You're not going to be happy. If I line it up right so those green stitches are right along the edges, that's what I'm looking for. Those green stitches are where my blanket stitches are going to go. I guarantee it, unless you move something in your hoop. Then I can't help you. All right, so just putting that down. And remember I said watch the stitch order. Leaves were second. Oh, I got the wrong leaves. With block 1 and other blocks too, you'll see that there's more than one shaped leaf. So make sure you pick up the right one. I tried to use the wrong one, but it was very obvious it was the wrong one. Here's how I can tell. When I put it on, I'm like, wait a minute. You're going, oh, it covers all your lines. It's not supposed to cover your lines. It's supposed to kiss your lines. Wrong leaf. If it doesn't fit perfectly, wrong piece. Back in the pile it went. Then I said, oh yeah, there's a different leaf. You'll see sometimes we have them all connected. And that was so you would smaller pieces, you wouldn't lose them. Simply snip that apart like that, and that gives you your single piece. Now watch how nicely this leaf fits into position. See that? It doesn't fit this way. No, no, no. It literally kisses those alignment marks. That is what you were shooting for. This is why I do not recommend that you try to do this on the machine, because you're not getting a good view of where it goes. And I'm telling you, if you want your blanket stitches to come out right where they should be, you have to take the time to take the hoop off your machine, look down on your product, line it up. Here's what I do, is I kiss that one leaf. I don't kiss the whole thing all at once, guys. It's too much. I don't want to be that finicky. So now I'm coming down to this one, and I'm going to kiss this leaf, this tip right here. Now I'm going to go like it, boom. He's stuck down. That's it. Now we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to stitch out those blanket stitches. We're back at the machine. I was very careful when I put this in to not move anything in the hoop, but guess what? Because of how I line things up, I do a touchy, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm good to go. You always could use your projector again, though, if you accidentally bump something, but I'm pretty confident we're good. So I'm just going to push, again, I've got the same green in that I needed before, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to blanket stitch this little baby out. And you'll notice how precise that stem is. Because if I had been lazy about where I put that leaf down, then the stitching for my stem would have affected my leaf. So that's why I'm telling you to be careful. Of course, now that we're filming this, something horrible will probably happen. Okay, we just finished stitching out the blanket stitches for my stems and my leaves, and I don't know about you, but I'm a happy camper. So now it's telling me the next step on the machine is my tulip. Now I know my tulip's going to be in blue. Lucky me, I'm using the Orfill thread kit put together by 4 Pines. So I'm going to choose whatever blue I want, but for me, it's this one. You basically have 2 different blues and 2 different greens and all sorts of things. I'm going to use, I don't know what number this is. It's the darker of the 2 blues. I guess I could tell you the number in a minute. Again, I'm changing the thread now because I want my placement stitch to be the same color as my background because I'm doing blanket stitch. If I were doing this with a satin stitch, I wouldn't feel the need. But with my blanket stitch, I do. Doesn't mean you can't use the green that's in there, but I don't want to. So now we're stitching out the placement line. Some people will actually do all the placement lines like this first, and I started that way because there's certain people that don't like to go in and out of the hoop. But for me, I did see a difference, so I changed my thread. If you were one of those people that don't want to do it that way, just skip through on your machine or reorder your stuff so you don't have to go in and out. I wanted to take just a moment about the in and out. When I move this hoop out, no matter what hoop it is, I am hanging on to this arm. I do not want pulling out my hoop to move this arm. It can happen. I'm being gentle too. I'm pinching this frame that I've so carefully aligned up and pulling it out so it doesn't move. All right, let's go back over to the mat. By now, you've seen how easy this is. Am I good, Eddie? You've seen how easy it is. I know here's where my applique piece is. I'm going to line her up. And again, it lines up perfectly. And I don't try and get the whole thing at once. I zero in on like a tip. Literally, press it for a second, he's good. Then I'll come over here and I'll press this guy. Then I make sure this guy's good. Oh yeah, this guy's good. Yep, now I'm doing the final. I don't go poof, whole big thing all at once. That's where you will get some alignment issues if you do that. It just is naturally. It's a big piece. He's done. That's all I got to do. Now we're going back to the machine. We're going to do this blanket stitch, and then that file A is done. So we're back at the machine. And we're ready to do that final blanket stitch. Off we go. Now, while we're watching the stitch out, I wanted to point out a couple things about those crosshairs. Tried very hard to keep them within the shape itself. In fact, I think I've changed this file since the one you're seeing on the screen. The reason I did that is if you have the stamp feature on your machines, if I leave the crosshairs out like that and it creates a stamp, it actually is going to include the crosshairs as part of your stamp. So I started making them smaller and trying to fit them in. I can't remember on this one. It might not have been possible just because of the size of the file. But where possible, I tried to keep them within the boundaries of the applique file so that if you wanted to use the stamp feature, you could. And there she goes. And again, there's no law that tells you what color applique thread to use. That's totally up to you. You could have put green on this if you wanted to. And in my bobbin, I should have mentioned, I just have a pre-wound embroidery bobbin. And if you're coming into the classroom, the pre-wound embroidery bobbins are included in the class fee. The embroidery bobbins, needles, irons, cutting boards, all those things are included in the classroom fee when you come in. There it is. Now I'm going to show you how I would do one more lining up of A. Because remember I said I don't start over, go A, B, A, B. I go A, B, 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 C. And here's why. Again, I can pick up my hoop, or if I have lucky enough to have the Brother Magnetic hoop, just undo my magnets, move it over to the side. I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to go, whoops, I want to go back to my projector. It's going to move. It's going to send my projector down again. There it is. I'm going to turn my fabric. Guess what? This is my next day intersection. I'm going to take this and I'm going to get it sort of lined up. If you can see the crosshairs, they're lining up with the intersection of my seams that I told you mark A. This is the same thing for every single block. I'm going to put my hoop down. I did move that time. That's okay. What I'm doing now is checking my hoop, making sure my fabric doesn't have any wrinkles in it. The other thing that's nice about this SF101 is when I'm tugging like this, I'm not stretching anything. That SF101 is not going to stretch and my fabric is attached to it. So that's another beautiful part of it. Now I see I'm off. Now I'm just going to go do. And I also see it needs to be turned a tad. Whoops, too much. Turned a tad. This is where I get really finicky. Whoops. Stop doing that, you. And again, because I can wiggle my fabric a little bit, if I need to, like, I want to wiggle that a little bit. There we go. That looks dead on to me. And again, I'm checking my frame. Now I'm good to go. I'm good to switch back to green and do A all over again. And okay, we're back, and I have gone ahead and finished all my A files. And now it's time for me to do my B files. And remember, we identified the intersections that we were going to line up with our crosshairs. I'm going to bring up my B file, and to my embroidery, and there it is. And what's going to happen is I'm going to use those crosshairs to line up the crosshairs with my intersection. So I'm bringing those up. These, again, they're not something I need to stitch out unless I have to use a different hoop with stabilizer. They're just for alignment. And you can see they're down here, nowhere near where I need them to be. So let's move that guy up. A few more clickety-clacks. Whoop, too much. I'm going to bring it down. And that looks pretty darn good right there. So now it's all aligned. I don't have to do anything else, but I don't want to stitch out those crosshairs. Now you'll notice if I do, it's not the end of the world. They are covered by the applique in this case, but that's not always the case. So you kind of want to get in the habit of just skipping by them, going to the next step. And you'll see the first thing it's going to do is the 3 circles. Now I know those 3 circles are, I'm going to bring one over so you folks can see it. They're like pinky and corally. So I'm choosing to use the same applique thread for every one of these circles. So I'm going to go get my pink, and I'm going to load that, and I'm going to use that as my placement stitch and my blanket stitch or applique stitch. Take these guys off, and let's go. Let's do the placement stitch for the circles. You'll notice on this one, it did not start with stems and leaves. You have to pay attention to that. You may go, whoa, why is it doing that first? This is the correct order for this block. And we are going to apply the pieces in the same order that they're using placement stitches for. Let's hope it doesn't unthread this time. Doesn't look like it did. Yay. I think there's an adjustment you might be able to make on the cut size of the thread, or, I hate to admit it, but my bobbin case might need cleaning, and that affects the cut thread too. You'll notice when you're using a cotton thread that you do require more cleaning than a polyester. We're going to go to the mat and we're going to place these shapes. Once again, these pieces fit just so. This piece is not the right piece for there. See? Doesn't fit. This is not the right piece for there. See? Doesn't fit. I know this piece needs to go here. And again, snugly right up against those placement stitches. The placement stitches should be right on the edge. Let's put this guy in. Notice how I tap him first. I don't just squish him down. Then I give it like 2 or 3 seconds. Maybe not even that. That's all it takes. Back to the machine we go. You're probably starting to see a little pattern here, maybe? Here we go. We're going to do the blanket stitches on these guys. And when he's done, he will do the placement stitches for the leaf and the stem. And then, you guessed it, we're going to repeat this for every V intersection. Coming back now, it's finished the blanket stitch on those, and it wants to do the placement stitch for the stem and the leaves. So I'm switching to the green, because that's how I roll. So here's placement stitch for stem and leaves. To me, it's really cool how her I guess it's called a 16 block background, gives us the grid for placement on everything. Even if you're doing it Lori Holt's way. Whoops, that didn't look good. Let's hope that didn't mess something up underneath. That looked like my bobbin thread. It's not happy, but that looks okay. Notice the shape of this leaf is different than the shape of the other leaves. Also, notice the stem went down first. So we're going to place the stem down first. If you fail to follow that order, you're going to get some funny results when you go to stitch it out. All right, back to the mat. Let's get a piece of stem. See how handy these stem pieces are? You just I don't have to give you a bunch of little 1-inch stems and you worry about losing all the 1-inch stems. Because let's be honest, you will. Oh, Danny told me to use the right scissors. And again, the top isn't going to show, the bottom isn't going to show. So you don't have to get really like, oh, I didn't cut it exactly right. It gets hidden. And now we're going to put our stems on. Once again, see, I don't like stuff like that either, so you're going to see me get rid of that little buggy. They line up perfectly. If they don't, my friends, something is wrong. Don't continue. Ask. Get on our page, our Facebook page, and say, what am I doing wrong? This doesn't line up right. Let us figure it out before you keep doing it with the wrong shape or who knows what. Whoops. Now see how I'm off a little bit down here? You can't see it. Well, I am. So I'm using my little heated iron to kind of push it. There, I say. Now I'm happy. When it's hot, you can do a little bit of maneuvering. Back to doing our blanket stitch. And now we're just going to repeat the same process, turning our fabric, lining up with our intersections, and doing this B file 3 more times. We'll be back here when that's done. All right, look it. We finished all the A's, we finished all the B's, and now we're ready for C. And we know that C is going to give us crosshairs that lines up with this center intersection. So I've hooped it, so I'm, in the middle of this guy. Let's go to the machine and line it up one last time. There it is, 1C. Go into embroidery and go and turn on our projector, and again it's going to shoot crosshairs that show me where I need to align. I'm going to search. I want to align with these seam lines on my black. I'm not even close. I'm going to go up, and I'm very crooked. Not anymore. I'm still a little crooked. Almost. Come on, button. There we go. All right, so again, you just do it till you're happy, but once again, my crosshairs are lining up with my seam lines on my block. The other thing I like to look at is, are they at least making sense to the rest of my design? For example, if I move my projector over to this position, I can see where the blue petal is going to go around. Remember I told you, don't worry about the ends of the stems because they're going to get covered up? That looks really good as far as I'm concerned. And again, you see how it's winding up nicely? So I'm happy. So now I'm going to skip over those crosshairs because I don't need them. And I've got blue thread in. It's going to do the placement stitch for my large blue flower. And it should go over the bottom of those stems. Don't be alarmed when you see that. That's exactly what should be happening. All right, off we come. All right, so now we're going to place this. Now, the same thing. It fits perfectly. If it's not fitting perfectly, maybe you need to rotate it a little bit. I know most of the shapes are symmetrical, but not all of them are. And sometimes I feel that I need to rotate just a tad to get it exactly the way I want it. Now we're going to stick it down. We're happy with the alignment. We're going to go around. And then really press it down. And back to the machine for the blanket stitch. Thank you. Notice how by using this 101, I didn't have to keep re-hooping stabilizer. Think of all the time and money that just saved you. We just put the oversized 101 on once, and we have continued to do the entire block. We didn't cover doing the scanner, but it's the exact same thing except you hit the scan button and then line up the crosshairs with the intersection. And again, you can use the same technique here, the oversized piece of 101. So, with all the money you save on stabilizer, you can come in and buy a new luminaire. Okay, now we're going to change our thread because I have to do the center flower. And the center flower on this one looks like this. So I'm going to choose to use what I think is a more golden color. But again, it's up to you what thread colors. These are all the colors you're going to get in the kit. And I'm sticking with them. I know some of you who shall go nameless will say, I'm going to use variegated there. Placement stitch. Again, I changed my thread because I like it to match my background. Do. And then we're going to put that little guy in place. Oh, he looks so pretty. He looks so pretty. Oh, this is the last step of block one. Well, the last embroidery step of block one. Here we go. Now, these are oversized blocks. We will trim them down later. I don't recommend that you trim them all down and square them up now, only because we're going to give you some other options on how to finish the quilt later. And you may choose to leave the blocks a little larger than Lori Holt says to. If you're going to piece it the old-fashioned way, feel free to go ahead and square them up to 16 and a half. If you're not sure how you want to finish your quilt, just what I'm going to do is just trim off my extra SF101 and put this block aside while I go on and make block number 2. Can't wait for it to sing. Yay! Oh, let's have a big reveal. Let's see how pretty it is. Let me just catch this thread because that makes it ugly. Let's look. Now, like I said, I am not trimming it to size at this point because I'm experimenting with other techniques and what size works best on the block. But I will go around and trim just the 101 off of here, and I will turn it upside down and give it a good press. Danny, I found those 2 leaves I thought weren't in my kit. Now I know where they are. No kidding. I thought, oh, don't tell me I'm missing 2 leaves. The good news is you get SVG files, so if you do what I did, you can cut some more leaves out. Or yell. But, yeah. I wouldn't keep my pieces I'm supposed to be using close to my ironing surface because apparently I did. Okay, well, let's pretend that's not there. Here it is. There's no stabilizer to remove at all. It's completely done. I'm going to trim some threads because that's me. I'm going to trim off the extra 101. I'm going to put it in my box and go on to block number 2. If you have any questions, shout them out on our Facebook page. That's what it's for. Toodles.